After hearing his brother play, Ray Carega knew that he wanted to play drums. Percussion playing has taken him around the world to 15 countries and New York while serving his country. Now he shares his journey with us on OTP.
Thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Now, first of all, before we do anything, I see that set behind you. What kind of drum set do you have back there?
This is a Gretsch Catalina Club. This is my kit that I keep at home. I take it out sometimes for some shows, but typically this is what I use at home, and this is my practice kit.
There you go. Like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
All right.
I've had it for a while now, and it's traveled all over the world, so it's a good kit.
Well, that's a nice lead into you're in the Navy, Raymond, correct?
That's correct.
Right now. All right, and that's how we got connected up. First of all, tell us about where you're from. Was there music in your home and with your siblings? Let us start out there.
Sure. Well, I was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and I grew up in Old Bridge, New Jersey. It's about 40 minutes outside of New York City, 45 minutes outside of New York City. My parents weren't musicians, but music was there was always music on in the house. My father loved the Temptations, so I can remember listening to that a lot growing up. The Four Seasons, stuff like that was always played in my house. And my older brother, his name is John, and he started playing drums when he was in 6th grade. So when he was in 6th grade, I was like 5 years old, and I had an interest pretty much ever since then.
So your brother had a big influence on you to get you started.
Yeah, he was definitely the biggest influence for me to start playing.
Right. So then you get into school and you start playing there. Now I want to touch on this here because on every episode, and I talked to musicians, there was something about the instrument that brought you in. My uncle played sax, my dad played drums, but what was that drive besides your brother? I mean, did you love the sound, the feeling, the beat? What was it for you? Yeah,
I probably just thought it was cool. When I was like younger, I probably just felt like, well, if there's, all of the instruments that I could choose from to be in, like school band, drums I felt was the coolest. I don't know if I had a connection to the sound or anything like that. I just remember thinking that was cool, or maybe I thought it was cooler than everything else.
Not saxophone.
No, the saxophone's cool. But I just wanted to do whatever my older brother did. And maybe, if he played a different instrument, I would have wanted to play that instrument too. But that's just kind of how it ended up.
Wow, it's fascinating that does your brother know how much of an influence he had on you?
Yeah, he does.
He does?
Yeah.
That's right on. That's cool. He can turn around and say, look, this is, I showed him everything I know. And you have to keep paying him out of your paycheck,
Right.
So what happened now? Talk a little bit about your music education coming through and getting into high school there.
Sure, yeah. I joined the school band in 6th grade, and I started playing drums just in band class. Started learning the basics of how to hold the stick, how to read, and I really loved it. And after my first year, my grandmother bought me a drum set. And it was a Mapex. I don't even remember the, what it was exactly, but it was just a Mapex. It was black, and it had a hi-hat and one cymbal, and it was my first kit. And I played on that all summer, the summer of 6th grade. And that's kind of when I started to really fall in love with the set. But at that time in school, there wasn't really much for drum set. Like maybe there was a couple jazz band tunes you can get on drum set for. So I got some lessons at some point in middle school. maybe lasted like maybe 6 or 8 months.
Was that your grandmother you said bought you the drum set?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because I just had another episode I talked to yesterday with some friends of the family, and their son plays trombone. And I take that back. He plays drums. They play trombone. And the dad said, David said, when he came home, he wanted to play drums. And I was like, oh, How did your mom think about that, having the drum set? A lot of parents I've had the experience, they were like, oh, couldn't you pick a flute?
Right. They were pretty supportive. The drums were in the basement, okay. And they let me play really whenever I wanted. Obviously, I couldn't play it like super late at night, but yeah, they let me bang away. So shout out to the parents for being easygoing about that.
There you go. All right, so you're up in high school. Tell us a little bit. You did have an opportunity to play in jazz band up there in high school.
Yeah, I played in jazz band, but the big thing was marching band. I was in the drum line. I played snare drum in the drum line, and that was huge. But what was really the coolest thing about high school was, at that time in the early 2000s, I went to high school from 2002 to 2006. Right. And everyone played an instrument. Like all of my friends, like someone played guitar and someone played bass and someone sang, and then you can start a band. Right. And I was in a bunch of bands, and you'd go to someone's house on a Tuesday after school and you jam with them, and then you go to someone else's house on a Wednesday and jam with them, and it was really cool. Right. And then what was even cooler is at that time there were clubs that were kind of getting older and dying out, that were really popular in the 80s and 90s in like New York and on the Jersey Shore, that were allowing teenagers to come in and play on like a Friday evening or a Saturday evening or a Sunday.
A jam session.
Yeah. So, you'd go to the club and they'd give you a stack of tickets and you'd sell them to your friends and you'd have a show. And that was really, really cool, because it was like every weekend some kid was playing somewhere. And if you weren't playing, you'd go see your friend. And if you had your own show, hopefully your friends would come and see you. Right. So it was cool to be able to do that as a teenager.
Yes. Now, do you remember what type of music were you playing in?
So at that time, it was really like the music video kind of generation. Yeah, so whatever was on TV or MTV, I guess you can say, or VH1, I think had a lot of music videos too. That's what I liked. So I loved rock music because, I loved watching drummers and stuff like that. So we tried to just emulate whatever was on TV and whatever we liked. So I can remember like loving like the band 311 and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, System of a Down, like Rage Against the Machine. You wanted to be those guys. Like we had a show once in at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, and we just all decided, me and all my friends were like 16, that we were going to shave mohawks into our head. So there's like great pictures of that, from when we were so young, and we used to take our shirts off when we were on stage, just like, we wanted to be what we saw.
Right.
So that was really, really cool and a really fun time. And I still keep in touch with a lot of those guys that I used to play music with.
Let's touch about that a little bit. How much of the music has an influence on the young population and how it motivates that listener, that young listener, in making literally a decision about your life. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. At that time, were you thinking, okay, I want to do this for a living?
Well, yeah, definitely. Like, I definitely knew that, like, I didn't want a quote unquote real job. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Right.
I just knew that, like, if I could figure out how to play drums, mm-hmm. I wanted to do that. So I remember when I was a freshman in high school, the band director I grew up in a really big, pretty big town. So we had 2 middle schools, right?
Okay.
And the band director from one of the middle schools needed a drummer for the 8th grade graduation.
Right.
So I somehow got a phone call. I guess they called my mom or dad. They're like, hey, can Ray come and just play this 8th grade graduation? I need someone to do it.
Right.
So I walked in and I read the music. I played like snare drum for like Pomp and Circumstance and stuff like that. And he handed me $20. Yeah, I don't know if that was like totally allowed, but I was like 14, and I remember going home and I showed my dad. I'm like, "Look, he paid me $20." I'm like, "If I can just play drums, maybe I could just make money." So at that early age, I definitely was thinking like, "Oh, maybe I could do this. Like, maybe this could be a thing."
Right.
But it's easy to think like that when you don't know a lot about the world, and at that time, not everybody was super supportive. I mean, my parents were, but when you have like guidance counselors and teachers and no disrespect to them because they're only trying to help you, but they'll say things like, you need a backup plan, you need a backup plan, you need a backup plan. That's how you start to think, so
I've said it. I have to be transparent, Yeah.
Well, there's truth behind it, there's reality behind trying to do that and how hard it is. So
you nail something in there because what you're talking about is passion. You started growing that passion for the music, for the instrument. And you're right. Do you have children?
Not yet.
Okay. So I don't know, man, when you get your children, your mindset may start to change a little bit, but when your children come in, when you're young, you're just thinking, boom. Right. Gas to the pedal, but you took that dive on the percussion and went forward. So now you're out of high school, you got your buddies, you're jamming, you're playing. Where do we go from there?
So I took like a year and I got like a job in my hometown and I went to community college and I really didn't play much music because all my friends left to go to college. Okay. And there you go. Yeah. Everybody left. And I thought maybe I would do drum corps. I auditioned for a couple drum corps in the area and I didn't really like it. I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And I was studying music at the local community college, like learning for the first time, like really understanding like theory and oral skills. And I was taking piano. And I just remember when my brother was going to school for music and I went up to visit him and I saw someone's senior recital. Okay. And I was like, I need to figure this out. Like I have to do this. I thought it was so cool. And I was like, you mean you can really like live on this campus and just play drums all day? Yeah. It's like, that's really, what a world. Yeah. Like I didn't know that was even a possibility. Right. So I auditioned and I got in and I started going to music school. I was like a year later than I should have been because I took a year off, so to speak. Right. And I went to Montclair State University and I studied percussion. Well, at first I was studying music education. Okay. Because it was ingrained in the backup plan. Right. And then by the time I was a senior, I really decided that I was like, I really want to just go for it. So I changed my major, officially changed my major my senior year, although there were some other things that were going on there. I wasn't like actually taking any classes towards the education degree by the time I was in my junior year and stuff like that. Right. But I ended up with a degree in percussion performance.
I see. I want to stop on that for a minute because how many times have we heard of people like Jarrett, my son, you get in that fork in the road where I call it that in college, whether you're saying, okay, do I really want to go into education or performance? Or it was a little different for me back in the day. I knew I wanted to teach music, but you had to get those skills up. And so you really got on that track of that, getting that percussion degree and going in there. Did you have, what was your fear like, or were you just right into, okay, I'm just going to go and do this without any fear or what have you? Because a lot of the kids, let's face it, people are thinking about making money. You made that $20, but now you're in college and you're going, okay, I got to buy a car.
Right.
I mean, what did you think?
I was scared. I was petrified, and I'm like 20, know, and I was absolutely petrified. But you don't grow unless you overcome that fear. And in a really weird way, I was actually I had a bigger fear of being a teacher because I feel like that's a much more difficult job. And I have so much respect for people who are educators because it is, tireless. It's thankless, and it's difficult. And the people who can do that are so strong. And I wasn't like that, I couldn't see myself doing that. And, I'm pretty passionate about music, and I'm passionate about education. I said to myself, I'm like, I don't want to be the guy that discourages a student from wanting to do music because I don't like my job. Right. Maybe that's a pretty mature way to think as like a 20-year-old, but I had a pretty serious conversation with my teacher, my drum instructor at the time, and he was like, well, you really got to think about it. Right. And that's the decision I ended up making. So I just want to say shout out to all of the band directors that are doing it right now, and shout out to you, because I know you were a band director for 30 years, and I really, really have a lot of respect for people who do that. So thank you for your service.
I appreciate that. Well, that, like you said, at that age, and as you have the luxury now, and we all do, to look back, is a critical time to really do some in-depth thinking about your personality, where you want to go, and to have that thought, because let's be real, we've all seen teachers, heck, I'll go a step further, parents that just really didn't put any thought into what they were going to go to the next step, and not doing a very good job on either area. Or you can say that with any profession. But when you think about it ahead of time, although I want to say, when you were mentioning about your playing, I have a theory that when you get to your level of playing, that thirst to share what you're doing with others, starts to grow. Have you felt that yet? The need to private lessons, teaching?
Yeah. I definitely believe in sharing as much as I can with people who are enthusiastic about playing music and playing drums. So I'm always welcome to taking in students. At this time, I don't actually seek students out. Right. But if there was a young kid who came up to me that was like, hey man, can I take lessons with you? I mean, I'd be happy to.
Right. Now I want to go back, because I've got my notes here, but I sort of get on a tangent. Through your college career, you got into other aspects of percussion. Talk about that, because our audience, someone that doesn't know percussion, and I had a lot of kids coming in, they'd think, oh, drum set. So expand a little bit about that.
Yeah. So actually, I'll tell a funny story. So, in high school, I was probably one of the better drummers. I played, snare drum in marching band, and I was always playing the harder parts in band class, and I was playing drum set with a bunch of bands. So, I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I thought I was pretty good.
You thought you were hot shit.
I thought I was hot shit. And I get to college, and now everybody's hot shit. Right. So I get into my first lesson, and my teacher asked me to just, he's like, let's start with the first stroke. And I hit the drum, and it was like, no, that's wrong. So it was quite a shot to the ego, but it was humbling, and it was the right thing that needed to happen as like an 18, 19-year-old, because it helped me start to understand how much work goes into being a great musician. And, from just playing snare drum with him, I started to move on to learning how to play mallets. So I learned how to play vibraphone and marimba and xylophone and glockenspiel. Mm-hmm. And then I learned how to play triangle and tambourine and timpani. And I learned how to play congas and bongos and cowbell and, really learning how to play these instruments, I guess you can say like correctly, or
thank you.
Like understanding how to approach them, and how to get the correct sounds out of the instrument. And it was really cool. I spent a lot of time, by myself in a practice room, just practicing, hours and hours. And so my alarm used to go off every day. I want to say it was like at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning. And I would go to bed at midnight every night.
Right.
Because this is another funny story. It's the same teacher. I had a lesson and I was supposed to tune. I couldn't get the timpani in tune to play this timpani solo. Right. So he just said, he's like, listen, Ray, if you want to take this seriously, you're really going to have to start figuring this out. Otherwise, you really need to reevaluate what you're doing at music school.
Boom.
Right. And he opened me up, to like really start to think about a lot. And I knew I really wanted to do it. And he gave me good advice. He's like, listen, man, he's like, if you want to go and do college shit and party and hang out with girls or whatever, cool, go ahead and do that. But he's like, you have to get your ass here every morning.
Right.
So I made it a point to do that. So if I stayed out late, I still got to the practice room. If I was studying all night, I still got to the practice room. I just made sure that it was a serious part of my time there. And I kept that discipline with me. Actually, I really learned that type of discipline in marching band.
Right.
And I kept that through college, and I still keep it today.
Wow. Because when you were saying that, for me, it was the girls, and and in college, and at one point, I just got pissed at my horn. I wasn't developing the way I wanted to, and I got disheartened, and I said, okay. And Mr. Seals, my private instructor, God bless him, he said, look, don't show up, if you're not going to take this serious. And added a few other colorful words. And eventually, I had to, I think all of us make that choice at some point, because, we know we've got to be serious about what you're doing. I want to also address what you talked about with the instruments, because I think some of our audience, people in our audience, when you look at that instrument behind you, I don't think we all understand when you're playing the cowbell or that triangle, what it takes to make sure you get the right sound out of it. You took me back into teaching middle school, and I had a triangle, and I remember one of the kids saying, "Oh, I don't want to play triangle," and if you don't play that correctly, it's bad for the piece, and taking the discipline to really take this instrument, the triangle or glockenspiel or whatever it may be. You might have in your mind that it's a minor part, but it is a major part of what the composer wants out of the piece, and as a musician, you really are dedicated to learn all of those instruments. But percussion's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, for sure. I remember one of the first times I heard someone else who didn't know how to play let's impressionables yet. And I was like, oh, now I get it. Like you have that, the bell goes off in your head, or and you're like, oh, now I see why.
Right.
Now I see why it's taken so seriously. Now I see why they were like, you need to stay in a room and just hit the cymbals until you get the right sound out of it.
Yes.
A lot of what we do is, as percussionists, is, we're adding effect
Right.
to the music, and it's so important to play musically and to serve the music the right way. So yeah, sometimes at the end of a piece, the very, very last thing that happens is you in the back of the orchestra holding up a triangle, and you have to hit it as softly as you can. But if you don't do it right, it's not going to sound right. The whole the nuance is gone.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was cool.
Right.
I kind of miss it in a way. I miss that. But it was a lot of fun to be able to do that and to learn all of those instruments.
Right. And do you think that percussion drums, I mean, you get a bad rap, pardon the pun there a little bit, because everybody thinks percussion drums, it's an easy instrument. You hit it and I got a sound.
Right.
If I pick up the flute, if I pick up the guitar, I mean, you can strum, you can get a sound, but you go, boy, that does. But how many times I've had, parents or kids come in and say, well, that's such an easy instrument, I'm going to pick that.
Right.
But it's the most, I have said this 1,000 times, it's the most important instrument of whatever ensemble you are in.
Yeah, well, they say you're only as good as your drummer, right?
Then bam! Well, wait a minute. We got to shout out to the bass player. The bass player and the
yeah, we're the anchor, right? We're the rock holding it down. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, as a drummer, but I think it's a very difficult instrument to understand.
Yes.
And I think it's easy to look at like someone on TV or something like that, and seeing someone just like hit it and just think it's easy, because anybody can hit any, I can hit this wall, like you hit my computer, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you actually put a pair of sticks in someone's hand and they actually start to try to, they're like, oh,
right.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
This is actually much more difficult than I thought.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but there's something visceral about just hitting something, right? So just assume it's easy. I want us to take our time on this, because I want to make sure that people that come across this video, how serious the percussion part is, and you're dealing with the tempo. Yeah. Right.
I want to cuss, but there may be some the tempo, man.
Yeah,
and if you got a drummer that drags, it could be on trap, it can be on snare drum, whatever the case may be. But and that's another thing. But is when you put a percussion section together, you're dealing with multiple people having to be coordinated together. The bass drum player, the snare drum player, blah, blah, blah. And that's a minor miracle in itself.
Yeah, 100%. I remember I was at a gig, this is after college, and I was chatting with the guitar player from the band, and he was telling me, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but he just goes, man, he's like, you'll never know what it's like to play with a bad drummer, obviously because I am the drummer, but he was just making that reference like, oh man, like it's really difficult playing with a bad drummer. So, not to put anybody down, but yeah, it's important to understand what good time is and how to keep good time.
Right.
It's important to understand, like, whether you need to play directly on with a metronome or a little bit in front of it or a little bit behind it, or understand how to get the feel correct, what the band, how to make the other members of the band feel comfortable.
Right.
That's so important.
Yeah.
And it takes a lifetime to figure out. I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Okay. So let me get back to business, because we could go on for days on that one. So you get out of college, and what happens?
So I get out of college, and a good buddy of mine, we're still friends today, his name is Frank Schileri. He was starting a band, and I auditioned for his band, and I got in, and we started playing clubs all up and down the Jersey Shore, and in New York, and in Philly, down in Atlantic City.
Cool.
So we were doing like bars and clubs and casinos, and we were doing the pregame show for the Jets and Giants up at the stadium.
Man. Right on.
So that was a lot of fun. And then we eventually started playing some high-end weddings, and we started doing corporate parties. So we kind of eventually transitioned from playing like clubs and casinos to, it was like, you know, like 90% clubs and casinos to like 90% weddings. You know, we kind of just switched it. And I did that for, man, from the time I was like 23 until I was about 29. So that was like a really cool time in my life, because I had now figured out a few things about myself. And I started to really understand what people want. And, you know, I started to understand how to keep people on the dance floor, how to keep the people engaged in what you're doing. Because it's very different. Like, that setting is very different than like a concert.
Yes.
You know, a concert, people are coming to see you play your instrument. But in this case, people were coming to party. Yeah. So my function was different. And I learned a lot. And, you know, there's other stuff that you learn about playing lots of gigs. Like, you know, you start to understand how to load and unload. You start understanding how much it sucks to drive, you know, 2 hours after playing until 2:00 in the morning. You know, you start to understand like how important sleep is and how important having a good meal is, and
taking care of your body.
You start to see that stuff. And then, you know, I started to really start to understand what sounds I was producing and what mattered most and what didn't anymore.
Right.
You know, so we're playing pop tunes and old time classics and rock and roll, like, you know, songs that everybody knows, right?
Yeah. Covering.
Yeah. So I started out with this like really intricate setup, and I was using all this different shit, and I was like, oh, this is going to be for this, and this is going to be for that, and I'm going to use this and this tune, and then eventually, after a while, I pared everything down.
Right.
And I was just like, you know, I need to really be like middle of the road with my sounds. I need like a nice bright crash, a nice dark crash, some hi-hats that get the classic, you know, chick sound,
right?
A ride cymbal that can cut. I need a snare drum that could be, you know, like high pitched, and, you know, I used to throw a towel on it so I can get a low pitch too.
Right.
But that bass drum. That bass drum needs to be what keeps it going. So I used to, my bass drum, it was fat. It was just a big fat sound. And then I also used to set up an SPDS X, which used to get me my hand claps and my 808 sound. So I started to learn how to like keep my left hand kind of just became quarter notes on the pads. And then I'd play the groove with my right hand. Right. And I'd keep my foot going, you know, through the whole thing, you know, giving the 4 on the floor. And it was a great experience. And, you know, you end up playing like 100 tunes in a night. You know, you play for 2.5 hours straight, or whatever the case is. You do 4 50-minute sets at a casino from 10 o'clock at night until 3 in the morning, whatever it was. And I definitely cut my teeth doing those gigs. It was a lot of fun.
You know, a couple of things on that. The connecting with the audience. You know, you're out there and you're watching the audience, and then you're getting a feel for what worked and what didn't work, along with the tone. You know, for example, yesterday, I mean, I was just working around with just my mouthpiece, you know, and, you know, there's a lot more involved on the sax, but for percussion, you're dealing with multiple different things for getting the right different tone there. And I think, again, a lot of people don't understand what it takes to make it look so easy when you're up there on that stage. You know, it's phenomenal. And I want to make sure everybody, you know what? I love saxophons and everything, but when people come in, they feel the first thing they feel the beat. I can prove, because people, you know, nodding their head, you know, and if you drop a beat on a fill, it's like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, they know. It's like they know, but they don't know. But they know, you know.
That's right. The CD skip, you know.
Right.
You know, or what? Yeah, there you go. So you're doing all those gigs, and did you think that was what your life was going to be?
I knew this much that I just wanted to play drums. That's all I wanted to do. That was it. So I just knew that if I was playing drums, I was happy. So at that time, I mean, I was just having fun,
Right.
and I was just in it. And it wasn't those weren't the only gigs I was playing. I was doing other stuff. I was playing in a trio, and I would play for like musical theater people when they would do like showcases and stuff like that. And I would get random other gigs that would just come through.
Sure.
So I was working, and the $20 turned into more.
Yeah.
Goodness, right? But it was a really good time because it's easy, like you said, it's easy to look back on it and be able to reflect. But I learned so much about myself and about my playing that was a really important time. So
did you I'm going back to another episode. A student of mine that plays locally, Tina Marquez, she's a drummer, and we talked about the demons in the head. Did you ever question yourself about what direction or how well you're developing and you're playing? How did you deal with those kind of things?
All the time.
Yeah.
I still do,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I remember at that time I was trying to take, like, whoever would give me a lesson, I would take a lesson,
Yeah.
Whoever would allow me to come to their studio and play for them, I would do it. So that kind of helped me mitigate a little bit of that, because while I wasn't looking for validation, I was looking for someone to say, hey, maybe you should work on this. Like, it always helped me keep my mindset in a way that I was always progressing.
Yes.
Little by little. And there is something to be said about like consistently challenging yourself, because then it makes you feel like you're moving on or moving forward. But to stay in the same place and then to seek validation, like, hey, don't worry, you're doing good.
Yeah.
That's not the right mindset to have. So I was always lucky where I was always trying to challenge myself.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't realize it at the time. But looking back on it, I was like, oh yeah, I always kind of kept that mindset of just trying to get better and trying to learn. And sometimes it's not always just sitting down and playing. Sometimes you read a book. Sometimes you watch a documentary. Sometimes you do some ear training. Sometimes you go and you see a show.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you always have that mindset, like you're growing and you're learning, it's easy to fight those demons.
Yes. And listening to other players and players that are better than you, and trying to say, man, I got to step up. You remind me of another buddy of mine, Jay Blair, who sort of he's in his 80s now, and you sort of remind me of him, the stories he's talked about when he was younger. So just trying to navigate that world of playing, and then that other world. Now, were you married back then, or you were married to your drums?
I was married. Yeah, I was single. And I was married to the drums, man. Yeah, that was it. And it was, it was. I'm not gonna say it was the best time of my life, but it was, because there were some lean times where there wasn't really any money coming in, but it was great. I have no regrets about it at all.
Sure. Yeah. It is what it had to be for you to be where you are now. Absolutely. Yeah. So now what happens? You're over and you're gigging all over the place. Why make a left-hand turn at Albuquerque?
Right. Well, it was, I was getting to the end of 2016. Or it was like the summer of 2016, and I was just looking for something different, and I really wanted to just see what else was out there. And there were things personally in my life that had nothing to do with music that weren't going that well.
Yeah.
And I started looking up some auditions and some gigs, and I had missed a bunch of like open call auditions, and I had missed a bunch of deadlines. But a good buddy of mine, his name is Jonah David. I saw that he was another drummer from Jersey who had been a professional musician, and he had joined the Navy band. Okay. And I had just called him one day, and I was just like, hey man, can you tell me about this gig? And, he gave me the rundown. We spoke for like 2 hours, and I ended up setting up an audition in Newport, Rhode Island. And I prepared for it, and I went up there, and I won the audition, and I just decided, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this for 4 years, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. And then I left for the Navy in February of 2017.
Wow. Now, wait a minute. I got to back you up.
Sure.
Because I even said this with Jared, the bottom line is when you enlist, your life is on the line. Yeah. When it hits the fan, drop the drums, drop the sax,
yeah, you're going
grab the M16, whatever. And so that was a leap for you.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah. And thank you for your service for sure on that, man.
Thank you.
So you take off, and how was that in your mind? And tell us about that journey when you started.
Well,
you went to boot camp, of course.
Yeah. Even the transition just up to leaving was, because I had sold all my belongings, and
wow.
I lived in my parents' house. I'm like 29, and I'm like living at my parents'. And then I like lived up at my brother's house for a little while, which was my old apartment anyway with him.
Did they think that it was a good idea?
Yeah, for the most part, everybody was supportive. Some people were worried,
Yeah, of course.
But for the most part, everybody was pretty supportive of me. No one tried to like legitimately talk me out of it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a weird time because, you end up really with just like, honestly, at that time, I literally had like my clothes and my drums. Like that was all I had,
Yeah.
So I go to boot camp.
Right.
I go to Virginia for a little while, and then I got orders to serve in Italy, and I lived in Italy for 4 years and toured Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and it was an awesome experience.
Take us into that journey. Where did you go? The people you played for?
Sure.
Paint the picture for us.
Yeah, so I get there, and the first thing I did was eat pizza, of course. And I started playing just kind of in the general area of Naples. I was living in Naples and stationed in Naples. And then once 2018 hit is when I really started to do international travel with the band and stuff like that. So I went to Spain. I went to France. I went to Kosovo. I was in Cyprus. I was in Belgium. I was in Latvia. I was in Luxembourg. I've performed in Israel also.
Wow.
I was in Africa for 2 months. I performed in Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Senegal, Cape Verde. I also was in Ukraine. I was in Ukraine like 7 months before Russia invaded.
Oh man, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
that was at the end of my tour.
I'm glad you said that. Now you're giving us a timeline here.
Yeah. But I was all over, and I was also like in the north of Italy. I was in Sicily.
Right. Sure.
So, and then not to mention at that time I was also doing my own leisure travel, so I was still seeing places just on my own.
Yeah.
I performed in Malta. It was amazing. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life, and I certainly don't regret it.
Yeah, sure.
I was there even during COVID, and I still had an amazing experience there. And I'm an Italian American also, so and my family, parts of my family come from Naples, so
Yeah,
it was really cool to be able to be there.
Right.
You know, so it was amazing, and I'm super grateful for that time.
What type of bands and ensembles were you playing in?
So I was just kind of in like the ceremonial band and the parade band and stuff like that, and then eventually I was in the pop band.
Mm-hmm.
Then most of the touring I did is when I was in the brass band.
Okay.
And, that's like when I went to Africa and stuff like that.
Right.
And then I was in the combo, and I was in big band. So yeah, most of my time I was actually in the combo, because the last like 2 years or so I was in the combo.
Okay.
And
Cool.
yeah, I mean, you get a chance to play in a lot. You know, of course, there was the wind ensemble where I always played Alice and stuff like that, and in wind ensemble. So
yeah, there you go. Well, that's a great lead into the clip we're going to play.
Sure.
For the listeners, kind of give us an idea of what we're going to see and what you're playing here.
Sure. So at that time, this was during COVID, and what we were doing is we were partnering up with a music group from Mauritius, and the style of music is a fusion of Saga and jazz. It's called Segaz. So what you'll hear a basic kind of 12/8 feel, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, boom, dun, dun, dun. But you'll hear the accent on the second triplet. So it's dum ba dum dum ba dum dum ba dum dum ba dum dum, and you'll hear that kind of throughout the whole piece.
Okay.
You'll definitely hear it, like you'll hear pretty much a four on the floor on the bass drum, and you'll hear it on the snare drum. Boom, got, boom, got, and it's the combo. It's the Naval Forces Europe and Africa Band combo, and you'll also hear a group of musicians from Mauritius, and they're all students, which is even cooler.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
all right.
It's a group of student musicians, and in the video, it's just the drum cam, so it's just on me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's take a look. Oh man, that's some good stuff right there.
Thank you.
Yeah. You had fun doing that.
Yeah, that was great. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. You know, I wrote a note down. Talk about the feel for percussion, just the feeling that as you're playing, what is happening in your body and your mind as you're going through this, something like that, playing.
Yeah, so there's a ton of improvisation. Almost all of it is improv. You know, I have a general idea of what I'm going to play.
Right.
In terms of like when the music changes and when the form changes, like I kind of know what I'm going to be going for.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to play everything exactly like that. That's in my mind. So something I try to do, and I learned this from one of my favorite drummers. His name is Mark Juliana. He says you can't really like plan for the unknown, but you can prepare.
Right.
So I try to keep myself prepared. And what that means for me is constantly putting myself in a position where I'm always improving.
Right.
And
right.
something I learned from when I was taking lessons with Billy Martin from Medeski, Martin and Wood. One of the things he used to make me do is just start out my lessons, just play me a drum solo.
Right. Yes.
Just play, don't worry about anything. Just play it.
Right.
And I try to keep those two things kind of in mind while I'm doing something like that.
Right.
But I also have to serve the music.
Yes.
So there's like all, and you guys like, what does it feel like? There's like all of the feelings inside.
Right.
You're like a little bit anxious, but you're super excited, and you're super confident, but you have no confidence at the same time. And you're like, oh shit, wait, I have this idea. And I don't know who said this. But it's like, I forgot what drummer said this, but it's a really funny quote. It's like, if you're thinking about playing it, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I just remember that I knew I had one take to do that. And the reason why is because the video was on me, and it was going to be like, well, if this is the video that I capture of you, it has to be the audio, because I'm not going to be able to sync it up. So you have to play the same thing every time. And I was like, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was maybe I think I had stopped it once before that. We were playing. I was like, no, like, let me get a second take at it. So that was the second take, but I did that all in one shot.
Sure. Yeah, when I had jazz band at the school, one of the things I would tell the drummer was that when we're doing improvisation, sax, trumpet, what have you, but for the drummer, you're always improving when you're doing a fill, what have you, and if you're not comfortable with that, you got to get used to your skin. You got to get used to the water that you're in to do that. And, there are some people that are not comfortable with that improvisation part of the music,
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. Something that I think about that a lot of musicians do is they'll let's say they're like, they're about to play their performance. It's with the big band, and they know they have a solo coming up.
Right.
And it's supposed to be an improv solo.
Yeah.
But they'll spend their time practicing like certain licks they're going to play during their solo.
Right.
So what you kind of end up doing is you're taking these things in a different context and trying to insert them into an improv context, and it's always going to be different if you're really improving.
Right.
So if I can I can take it back, when I graduated college, I started playing regularly with two musicians that I used to play with in high school all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
Their names are Justin and Brendan, and we form a group called Fredo. And what we used to do is we'd go into the rehearsal studio, we'd pay for our time, 2, 3, 4 hours, and we would improvise
the whole thing.
Everything.
Right.
And if there's I learned mostly to really improvise from doing that.
Yes.
Because the hours that I put in with other musicians improving helped me harness that and take that with me when I'm in a situation like in this video.
Sure. Yeah.
So you can be in a practice room improvising. That's great.
Right.
But you got to get with other people. And sometimes you got to turn the music stand around.
Yeah.
Don't look at any music and just don't play a tune. We're not going to play anything. We're just going to, all right, man, put it off. We're in. We'll figure it out.
You got to jump off into the water.
Yeah.
Metaphorically speaking there. Yeah. So where are you now, and what's your future look like?
So now I'm stationed. I re-enlisted, and I'm stationed in Washington State, and I play drums for Navy Band Northwest. I am currently the band leader, so to speak, of the pop band and the combo here at Navy Band Northwest. It's an awesome experience. I'm learning a lot. I get to travel the Western United States. I've never even been out here before I moved out here, so I've never seen the West before.
Right.
And I have about a year and a half left on my orders. And
Okay.
as far as what the future is concerned, I don't know. I'm very much a musician where I don't really like to make any decisions until it's
Right.
time to make the decision.
Yeah.
And I sub at a few churches in the area.
Cool.
I was the house drummer for a jazz jam that we set up for students.
There you
That
go.
ended a few months back. And now I'm coaching the jazz band or the rhythm section for the jazz band at Bremerton High School, which is the local
Okay.
high school here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's been really cool. I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling coming up this summer, which will be a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the summer. There's a lot of stuff going on in the summer.
Great. You know what? I smell a little bit of that music education seeping in there somewhere down the road. Yeah. So, okay, we're going to close off here for a minute, but before we do, talk to our audience about why music. What for those that may have played in high school, college, and then life got in the way, move forward. Why keep music in our life?
Oof, man, that's a deep question. I think the question, I would almost answer it with the question like,
Okay,
could you imagine your life without music?
right on.
You know,
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah,
Even if I couldn't play, I mean, you're
yeah,
you're still gonna listen to it. It's still gonna be a
Right.
part of your life. So whether you play once a month or you play with other people or you're a professional,
yeah,
it doesn't matter. I mean, it's art. So
yeah,
as long as you keep it close to your heart,
yeah.
and you love it and you do the right things for it, it's always for the right
Yeah.
reasons. Music
Food
is
for
always
the
important. Yeah.
food for the soul.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I had a episode with another musician, and he was talking about another sax player, older person that had a stroke, and one of the arms could not use, and he got the sax built so he could play the saxophone with one arm, and that just sums it up right there. Yeah. Hey man, I love the talk.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you.
Oh, nice to meet you. And you know what? Keep an eye on you because you're going to do great things moving forward. And when I see you on TV, I'm going to say, I taught him everything he knows.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, God bless you. And I want to thank the audience for coming in. You can find on OTP on the podium. And thanks for being on the podium today, Ray. Appreciate it. And you can find the podcast at any of your venues where you find your most favorite podcasts. Check us out there. Don't forget to subscribe. And let's go on out there and play all the right notes.
That's right.
You've been listening to The Podium. If you would like to be a guest on The Podium, email the show at onthe2@gmail.com. That's ONTHEPODIUMTOO@gmail.com.